If we exclude from the price index grains, which have been imported in great quantity with U.S. aid, there has been a 20% average price increase since last June. At the same time, we find that the volume of money rose by almost 50%, a development which could have had grave inflationary consequences. As long as there is serious inflation, the prospect of high profits on a quick turnover of goods will attract money into speculative business ventures and away from productive enterprises. Interest rates will be so high, they are about 10% a month now in Seoul on short-term loans, that the manufacturer cannot borrow funds to create plant capacity. And over the whole economy, there will be an uncertainty and unrest that does not conduce to long-term production planning. All of you here have personally experienced what I am talking about during a large part of the period since the war. Now, what can be done to ensure against further inflation and provide a climate in which Korea can finance new plant capacity in substantial amounts and thus move more rapidly toward the goal of self-support? If I venture to make suggestions as to the answer to this question, it is because of my eagerness to do my part in seeing that the more than $300 million of United States economic aid this year is spent in a way that will produce the greatest results in accomplishing the recovery aims for which it was appropriated. Even more important, it is because of my deep interest in Korea, my conviction of its world importance, and my great affection for my many friends in Korea. The government of the Republic of Korea has been doing many effective things to combat the inflation which poses an ever-present threat to recovery objectives. It has courageously tackled the question of government expenditures. It has moved toward the sale of aid goods at realistic prices, a topic which some of you may remember I discussed in my last speech before the club, I think in December 1955. There's been real progress in that area. The results are apparent in the greater stability of prices in the last 9 months as compared with the very large increase I mentioned a little earlier. Now, what more can be done to clinch the victory which is already partly won? Of course, the sound practices already put into effect need to be carried on with even greater resolution and strength. I venture to suggest, however, that a very important further victory over the forces of inflation can be gained by courageous action, and it will take courage to place certain of the large government corporations on a paying basis. If these corporations become solvent, they will cease being a heavy drain on the government budget and cease requiring the government to pay for their operating losses by increasing its own deficit, a sure way of promoting inflation. To accomplish what I am suggesting, it will be necessary to raise the rates and charges of these corporations. Let me give you some idea of how important this action might be in the fight to balance the budget, and so to reduce the pressure and danger of inflation. The Korean National Railways, it's been computed, are now operating at an annual deficit in excess of 15 billion won. That's $30 million. The Korean Electric Power Company, I'm informed, is operating at an annual deficit of 3 billion won, $6 million. This, by the way, is no criticism of the very able people who are running some of these corporations. This is a broader question. The telephone and telegraph system's deficit is on the order of 1 billion won, or $2 million. The government-operated Daehan Coal Corporation is operating at an annual deficit of 3 billion won, or $6 million. Add all these together, and there's a total deficit just from these corporations of more than 22 billion won, or $44 million. The net effect of all this is to intensify inflation and cancel out a very considerable part of the good which American aid is meant to accomplish. This is a matter of peculiar interest and concern because many millions of dollars of U.S. aid funds have gone and are going into increasing the capacity of the Korean National Railroads, the Korean Electric Power Company, and the Korean telephone system. On all these utilities, the rates are so low that heavy deficits are generated. Consequently, So long as the rates remain unchanged, in proportion as utility service is increased, the drain on the rock treasury is increased. Here then is one opportunity which could be seized for action to help halt inflation and rationalize the national finances in a way to encourage private investment. Yet in no case is Korean capital alone likely to be enough to bring about the degree of industrialization needed to wipe out unemployment and underemployment and give Korea a balanced economy. Some of the funds necessary for this must come from the investment of foreign capital. Here the experience of the United States itself confirms the benefits derived from foreign private capital. In the 19th century, the United States was greatly aided toward industrialization by the free and unrestricted inflow of British, German, French, and Belgian capital. I do not believe it ever occurred to Americans to consider that this subjected them to economic imperialism or capitalist exploitation or any other imposition or indignity. Instead, our steel, railway, oil, and other industries blossomed under beneficent ministrations of foreign capital, for we received something more than the capital, important as that was. We got also administrative experience and technical know-how, and that always goes with proper foreign investment. Today, the United States itself has become a great exporter of capital. United States private investments abroad total more than $27 billion. Of this, about 4/5 is invested in Western Hemisphere countries. The sovereign Republic of Korea will, of course, make up its own mind, but America's experience would seem to counsel a warm welcome for, rather than a jealous fear of, foreign private capital. And I would like to add a further comment on this particular point. My experience with Koreans has been that they are people of courage, of initiative, of energy. They are not fearful people skulking behind cover. They fought bravely. They act bravely. They're stubborn. I have had occasion to know that they're stubborn and to respect them for it, because a strong person is bound to be a stubborn person. I think it's entirely inconsistent with the tradition and character of the Korean people, for Korean businessmen or for anybody in Korea, to fear the investment of foreign capital, to fear the competition that would come in. This is not in character for Koreans. Koreans are brave, and I would urge all of you to perform an act of faith, to take that fine courage which you possess in your hands, and to launch out on a brave effort to attract foreign investment and benefit from it the way every country that has attracted it properly has done. I hear so many fears. They don't seem to me to be typical or in proper character for Korea. At the present time, the total annual capital investment in Korea comes to something more than $200 million. U.S. economic aid accounts directly for about 180 million of this, and United Nations Korean Reconstruction Funds and private Korean funds for practically all the remainder. Total capital investment, including foreign aid, runs at the rate of no more than 9% of total annual available resources, estimated at roughly $2,200 million.